What is going on, everyone? Carolina Dad here with Beyond the Podcast Sports Talk. Brand new segment. And you're probably wondering, what the heck is this segment? As I also wanted the same thing, right? I decided that I wanted to, as the name states, go beyond the podcast. There's a lot of things that I want to do with this, but as I look to grow my channel, to continue to grow my content, I've learned a lot of valuable lessons along the way. And maybe you want to hear about my journey. Maybe it will inspire you. Maybe you can learn something if you ever decide to embark on anything like this. So I said, beyond the podcast, sports talk, I also understand the importance of more than just being a Carolina Panthers podcast. That's what I am. But I understand the larger reach of, hey, should I look into this topic? And if you follow the show, you know I kind of started to go into NASCAR, go into MLS. Those things fizzled away, which is okay. But I'm like, okay, well, this would give me a little bit of a platform to throw in some of that stuff as I want. But it's also more the business side and more of just me taking you behind the scenes of the show that I create, which is the Two Growls, One Roar podcast. And this first episode is not, I don't have a roadmap for like, I want this episode to go here, here, or here. I don't even have an agenda. I just have ideas flowing through my mind. So I was like, let me just go ahead and start recording. We'll see where this goes. And in the future, I'll get cleaned up content. I'll have how-to videos. I'll direct you on, hey, this is what I use for this, this, and this. But I wanted to take a step back because the first question, and really part of the reason that I'm even creating this episode today, is I hit a big milestone, a milestone on YouTube, which to many is probably a drop in the bucket. But I passed 500 subscribers. And when you hit the 500 subscriber threshold and you have 3,000 watch hours, which I do, you're able to start monetizing your content and your channel, which for me is new. When I started this show, I was like, man, one day it would be great if I could monetize. It'd be great if I could earn money. But in those early days, that was not, that was nowhere near reality for like it is today. I'm still waiting to get my watch hours accumulated because I'm at 3,200. You need 3,000. So I've hit it, but the timing and tracking is a little bit behind on YouTube side. So I'm thinking it's probably going to take a few weeks before I can officially apply. And then the next milestone after that is going to be 1,000 subscribers and everything that comes along with having 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which I will talk about. But I thought, you know what? Going through this journey, I've learned quite a bit. Why not try to share as I go through it? And it's more of a documentary for myself to reflect. It's a way to show y'all. But I got to go all the way back to day one. And if you are embarking and thinking like, hey, maybe I want to start a podcast, specifically a sports podcast, I think the first thing that you have to do is decide your why. The why behind whatever topic, whatever subject it is, you've got to have a why, and you've got to remember that why very early in the process. Because if you don't, and if your why is not aligned to your goals or your goals are not realistic, you're going to fail and you're going to get frustrated, but that will help you. And my why has changed. Like when I started the show, my why was, hey, I like the Panthers. I've always wanted to start a podcast. So my why was like, maybe it'd be beneficial for me to start a podcast about the Carolina Panthers. I like the Panthers. Y'all have heard me talk about, like, I was already doing a little bit of content on my Instagram, my personal Instagram page. And I said, well, why don't I just start and create the podcast? It'll give me kind of an outlet, allow me to do something I want to do. And my why at the time was like, just do it. Not to steal from Nike, but it was like, just do it. Just create it. Let's see what happens. Remembering that, hey, you're doing this for yourself. So that was the big why for me, is like, I'm doing this for myself, and whatever happens, happens. If it's successful, it is. If I have 2 listeners, it's, it is. If I don't, then it's still successful because I'm doing it for myself. If you start early and your why is, and I'm not saying you can't have this, but if your why right out of the gate is, I want to make money, I want to make a ton of money, I want to monetize, or I want to have, 1,000 listeners, or this, and this, you will fail. And I'm sure there's probably a success story out there somewhere where someone went through this and things just went right. But for the majority of us, this is now 1 year into the show. 1 year into the show, and I'm just now reaping some of the benefits. I'm going to talk about the money that I've earned, which is like a little under $100 for this entire year. And all that money was earned through X, through their verification, ads, and all that. So to think that you're going to turn on a switch and become like a Joe Rogan or, whoever your podcasting people are, it's not realistic that thing is going to happen. And what will happen as you get into it, you're going to get bummed. I always talk about being bummed out on this show. Even now with the success that I have, there's days where I'm like, why did this video or this podcast perform really well? And why did this one not? And why did this one get 1,000 views? Or you will look around as you enter into whatever your landscape is, compare yourself. It's natural as a human to want to compare yourself to other people and say, well, that podcast is doing really well, or I see that podcast has however many followers. Or you may even be looking at me and say, wow, well, your show is a little successful. Everyone's thinking the same things. Everyone's thinking the same things. And when you talk about a competition and who you're competing against, don't look outside, look within. And it sounds cliche, but really, if you start to latch on and like, man, I should really be like that podcast, or I should be like that one. No, be yourself and do what you want to do and do what you find successful. Now, a few things to think about if you are truly thinking about starting a sports podcast is the market, is the scope of your show, and what you want to talk about. Now, if you're broadly coming into something and saying, and this is just my experience, if you're like, well, I'd love to talk about the NFL, that's great. But remember, if you're talking about the NFL, there are thousands of outlets and sources and other people that are going to be doing that. That's just the nature of how big the market is. I mean, you could say the same thing for the NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball. If you're broadly going to talk about, and even taking a step back, if you're broadly just going to talk about sports, it's possible, but you have to remember that people have ESPN, they have Fox, they have CBS, they have phones, we have apps, we have data. So what value from your position are you going to bring to the common listener? Because no offense, but more than likely the listeners are going to be going to those larger market media people to listen, because face it, if you're just starting a show, nobody's going to really care about your opinion. You could be saying some great stuff, but nobody's going to truly care. What I've found, and I'm not saying you can't do it that way, but if you do it that way, just know it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of time for people to latch on, because you've got to really understand whatever subject you're talking about and be able to give some value or opinions that are not out in the larger market. But for me, where I found success was focusing on one team. And who would have thought, starting this, I was like, man, how am I going to only talk about the Carolina Panthers? Like, how is that going to be the thing? You would be surprised if you focus on one particular team. If you focus on one pro sports team, you will have people flocking to you. And I'm sure the larger market medias probably have maybe hundreds of pods, maybe. But I'm saying a lot of these smaller markets, one, I hit it off because Carolina's a small market team, smaller market. I know Charlotte's big, but we're a small market. The podcast landscape, when I looked out, I was like, there's like 10 to 20-ish podcasts, maybe more. But consistency is really what will help you. So whatever avenue you decide, it's about consistency. It's about saying, I'm going to produce one episode per week. You're going to get it on this day, which now for me it's changed because I do maybe 2 or 3 episodes a week. But you set your consistency and say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set aside the time. I'm going to do it. But to be able to do those things, you've got to spend time outside of just your general thoughts. You've got to go in, you got to read articles. Rule number 1, whatever sport you follow or whatever thing you're doing, find out the experts in that field. For me, it was like, okay, I'm here listening to all these press conferences and I hear blah, blah, blah from The Athletic, blah, blah, blah from ESPN, so-and-so from Charlotte Observer. I latch on and I'm like, oh, I need to go follow these people. They're the ones, they are the direct sources that are talking to the coaches, the players in every presser. I need to know what they're saying. I need to know their opinions because that'll help facilitate me. Here is the beauty of at least sports podcasting or NFL Carolina Panthers for me. The way things have changed, like years ago, you would have had to pick up a paper to formulate opinion or read this, this, and this, open up a magazine. Now everything's in front of you. It's right in your face. All the pressers are made available. So the thing that the only thing you are missing is a direct relationship with the team to say, hey, Eric, whatever, John Doe with blah, 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 blah. And I'm here to ask about, whatever it is. You're not the one who's in the pressers asking all the questions, right? That's really the difference. And maybe some of that inside knowledge where, okay, you're a reporter and you talk to this player, but you also start to understand agents and front offices. Like, yeah, there is a layer to it with that. But from your seat, you can listen to a presser. You can formulate an opinion. You can listen to an interview. You can formulate an opinion. You can study the roster. You can watch players. And you can create your own thoughts that people will latch on to. People will want to hear it. They'll want to understand that, oh, wow, you're really getting into the weeds. And for me, that's where things started to flourish is instead of doing this high level, it's so funny for me to go back and watch me talk about the Carolina Panthers this time last year, to be excited the way I was versus this year and how much I've learned over the course of a year. And I take that knowledge and now it's like, oh, these signings looked really great last year and I was so happy. This year, I've been doing this for a year and I understand how the dynamic is and what this team looked like. I can have a better opinion and provide that context to people. Or I can give ideas like, hey, I think we're lacking depth here and we're going to build it here. And just those things will happen naturally as you get into it, as you start to find your lane in your craft. It's a tough process. It is a tough process to, now that I just do it, it's like second nature. But for you, it may be very difficult to sit down every single week. So pick your cadence. Like, you don't have to do one episode a week. You can do it every 2 weeks. Think about what works for you and your why. If you're doing this out of passion and fun in the beginning, you don't want to run yourself into the ground trying to produce content every single day, because you're gonna get tired of it. Oh my gosh, this is like a second job, which it will become. It'll become a second job, whether you wanted to or not. But I think there are a lot of benefits for things that can happen. Like for me, it's mind blowing. I've talked about it, and I don't know who has or has not listened, but I remember I'm a big sports radio guy. I've always listened to sports radio. And that was what drove me to do this, is like, I listened to big sports radio, ESPN at the time. And I listened to WFNZ primarily in local sports. But I listened to ESPN. They'd always talk about blah, blah, blah with the Carolina Panthers. And I'd have an opinion and I wanted to share it. And finally, I called up one of the shows and I got a clip and recording of me going on there talking about how the Panthers should rebuild. This was back with McCaffrey, with Robbie Anderson, Steve Wilks, all of that. And they validated that, oh, yeah, that's actually a really good opinion, is what they ended up saying. We kind of talked through it, which is really cool. But then I sat back and I'm like, why do I have to validate myself to call these people when I could just do it myself? I can come on here, talk about it, do it, say whatever I want. And that's partly how the show ended up happening and how things have changed. But just seeing the total progression of how it's panned out. And for me to be a voice, at least locally, to talk about Panthers is mind blowing still. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like, it's mind blowing that I get to go on our local sports radio in small Wilmington, North Carolina, and talk to the larger group in this area about the Panthers and what they're doing and my opinions. And is it good? Is it bad? That means a lot for someone that is just slowly learning this whole thing. But I think like I said, having your why, picking the subject, so you got to know what you're going to talk about. And I think it's okay to be granular, or if you want to talk about the ACC, or if you want to talk about a particular college or college sports, like I think those things are fine. But know what you're going to do, how often you're going to deliver it, and be consistent. Just be consistent every single time. There's a lot of this grind that you're going to hate. If you really want to try to get successful or build something out, you're going to hate recording, clipping, whatever all those things are, then promoting it, then turning around and doing it again 2 days later or 5 days later. Like, you are in a continual pattern. I will say things are going to happen where as people start to follow you, you don't have to do it as much. Like, sure, like if you want to promote yourself and you should be putting out your clips and content, you'll have to do that. But at the same time, as people latch on, they're already going out to find you. So it's like, okay, I don't actually need to go out here and clip this same episode 50 times. I can clip one or two. Everybody will still listen. They'll know that I'm still creating it. So it's like fresh in their mind. Oh yeah, let me go listen to him. But then people just latch on to you and like your opinion, and you just start tweeting out whatever you feel about your team. And people are like, oh yeah, I like that, I like that. You're going to see the trajectory go up. Now, think about it. I did not go to school for journalism. I am not a journalist. I didn't study journalism, but I've learned a few things. I haven't read any books on journalism, but there are a few things that I have learned as you sit in this seat. And you can choose to do it however you want to do this. One, it's treat everyone with respect. And that can be difficult, especially if you're a fan of a team and maybe your passion was you're a Green Bay fan, you want to bash the Chicago Bears or their fans. You got to be a step above that, which can be hard at first. You're like, oh man, I'm so used to just getting on whatever platform and arguing with people. And there are people that still do that. I don't recommend it. You can do it, but if you want to set yourself apart, which is what I'm trying to do, is like you want to have a positive image, because the positive image of your show is what will resonate with people and open up more doors. So, oh yeah, you know what? This guy over here, he seems to interact with fans really well, or other people, and give, really good opinions, and he's not bashing people. Maybe I should invite him onto the show, or maybe I should connect with him and record a podcast. Like, you'll see that. But if you're the person that's always on whatever platform going at people and this, and I get it. Some people can do it and they'll probably be okay, but that's not me. Like, I can't do it. So I choose that. You have choices to make around how you produce the show. And do you want to curse? Do you not want to curse? I think there's room for both. Like, honestly, I think for me, I chose to have like a family friendly, I'm not going to curse on the podcast type thing. And you can decide to do it any way you want. It's just a matter of how do you want to decide to do it. There's so many things you have to think about, and it's just a continual process to keep building. But once you're out here and starting square one, okay, I'm going to do a sports podcast. Okay, I'm going to do it on this team. Let me start just straight up reading. I will say, you may have this inclination to wait. You may say, well, I'll start recording when I've watched 50 tapes of film, I've read every article, and I've gone over every presser. And that's how I felt. I felt like I can't actually go out and create a Panthers podcast until I've settled in and I've done these things. and it's under my belt, and then I can go out and talk about it. But if you say that, you're just going to be drinking from a fire hydrant hose, and you're never going to do it. You're never going to produce the show. You're never going to create the content. You're just going to sit back and say, well, maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. You just got to do it. It's not going to be perfect, but one, remember, early stages, not many people are going to listen to you. And even the people that do, or if it's that early, you're probably not going to be giving them, great opinions or takes. I mean, maybe you are just out of the gate, straight fire. But I think it'll slowly pick up for you, right? Such a journey. And just being able to stay consistent is the biggest thing that's really impacted me. But I remember sitting back and I kept thinking, like, oh man, do I want to record an episode today? Am I going to say the right thing? Are people going to say, oh, that's a terrible opinion? That's a terrible take. Who cares? Who cares? And I still, like, even today, I mess up. I mess up 1 year into this. I tell people now, I'm a Panthers podcaster. I'm not a perfect podcaster. Not perfect, right? You're going to find things on me. I could find things on you if you were out here doing this. And that's just the nature. You can find it with anyone. Nobody is perfect. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to mess up. Don't be afraid of someone with a negative opinion. Guess what? There's a reason for a mute button, for a block button. You don't have to put up with it. I'll tell you, again, this is a decision that you have. I've learned to just not respond to some things. It's much easier to not respond than to continue down a path of someone who wants you to just come in and yell at them about whatever and feud. You don't have to do it. You don't. You can mute. All right, move on. Next. Not going to worry about this. Now, when you think about recording, to give you, I'll go into much more detail at a later date, but if you think about recording your content, you may also make an excuse and say, well, I don't have the microphone. I don't have a camera. I don't have recording software, video software. You can make a bunch of excuses, but I can tell you, you don't need it. You can start with your phone. Hopefully, if you have a phone, and AirPods, if you have them, you don't even need AirPods. You can just talk through on your video. And there's ways now to help. Like, you don't have to have the best of the best quality to get your content out there. I'm recording this right now on my iPhone. Like, I still haven't upgraded to like a DSLR camera. I plug it in through my computer into a MacBook and have streaming software. But I'm saying you personally could start and say, all right, I've got my Instagram, my Facebook, my X, my YouTube. Now I'm ready to create content. And you go out, you start recording videos. I mean, the beauty of it is you've got Reels on Instagram, on YouTube, TikTok, if you're a TikToker. You can just do short form content of vertical videos to talk about the subject, and people will start feeding in. Half of my content, like right now, even I'm recording on AirPods versus microphone. Like, you'll find your rhythm and your pattern. And I would say just don't let that be a hindrance that you got to have all these things, because you don't. And the growth that I've seen on my show is because of video and because of a camera, and most of it being recorded with AirPods. It's just about getting up and doing it and continuing to go from there. Well, folks, quite a ramble today, right? Quite a ramble for episode 1 of Beyond the Podcast, sports talk, right? Not really sports talk today. It was more Beyond the Podcast. I'll continue to go behind the scenes and share much more information, a lot more detail about the show, how we got here, how things are going, what else is going on. Because as I expand this, that as I grow the channel, I also want to make sure I personally am growing with it, so that I have the freedom eventually to maybe talk about other things and continue to build this out. So anyways, folks, this is Carolina Dad. Y'all have